Who wants to own these Michael Jordan signed rookie cards? Or should I say, who actually wants to pay a premium for them? Because these cards have been the talk of the town for the last few weeks, and it's raised a lot of questions around in-person autos, in particular those where the athlete is still alive, and whether or not a premium should be commanded for those kinds of cards. And I'm sort of up in the air a little bit about who actually wants to pay a premium for these things, but we'll talk through all those things today, and I want to hear your thoughts down below, as I do often say. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, I'd be surprised, because this has sort of been talked about everywhere. But as you can sort of see on screen, these 6 Michael Jordan cards were signed and then ended up getting graded as 10/10s, 10 for the auto, 10 for the grade, by PSA, and sort of raised a lot of questions in the hobby, because people basically saw this and it sort of kicked off those conversations around, are these things going to sell for ridiculous amounts of money? Are they actually worth the premium over, a non-signed rookie card? And should they command a price like this when somebody can go out there and get one signed for themselves? Yes, Michael Jordan doesn't sign too often these days, but, he's still alive, right? And he still wants money. So who's to say he can't go ahead and get something else signed? So I'll get to that in a sec. But like I said, these are the 6 cards in question. They graded 10/10s in a private signing session for this individual. Now, I don't think the owner of these has been discovered or disclosed. I think he's wanted to stay anonymous. But sort of where people jumped up in the air in the first place was, the autographs and the choice of pen to be specific. People sort of said this was a poor choice. And I agree, it's very hard to see. In particular, in other photos of the cards, it looks very, dodgy. It looks very poor, in my opinion. It doesn't look like you can actually see what's going on there. So they sort of missed the opportunity there to use something like a silver or gold to stand out a little bit more. But what was pretty cool was the inscriptions basically on some of these cards. So you've got 6 times NBA champ, 84-85 Rookie of the Year, 87-88 Defensive Player of the Year, and then 5 times NBA MVP. Now, when people basically saw this, they immediately jumped to like, let's pay more money for this kind of thing, because they are rare, right? How many signed Jordans are actually out there, and how many of those have actually been graded 10/10s? And what was sort of interesting here with, Eric Whiteback's account's post, the Collectibles Guru, apparently, according to the owner, these guys discussed it with him, that he turned down a $100 million offer for this collection, which is, absurd in the first place. That does not make any sense, and he does get grilled for suggesting that number is genuine in the comments. It's ridiculous, right? These cards aren't worth anywhere near that. If somebody was to turn down $100 million, they're incredibly stupid. The Collectibles Guru also got grilled by saying exclusive here when, the articles were first discussed by Collect in these 2 posts over here. But, Eric Whiteback aside, I think it's a really good question, and sort of Adam Gray has talked to this himself. He basically says, would I rather these than a normal PSA 10s? Yes, he would. And yes, I would too. So when I said at the start of the video, who actually wants these, I think, every single card collector out there would actually sit back and say, yes, I want to own a signed copy of a Michael Jordan rookie card over a non-signed copy, because number one, they're rare. And to me, as a collector, having stuff like that just adds to the whole thing. I've talked about that many times. Having a game use patch in a card or having an autograph on there, in particular on card auto, just takes collecting for me to a whole other level. So I get that. But where my opening question, I think, gets a little bit trickier is, should you actually pay a premium for these? Because he goes on to say, and I agree with him, but do these autos signed nearly 40 years following production double the value? When the card is already 200K for me personally, no. And I completely agree. I don't think it makes sense to be paying such significant premiums, for in-person autographs. We've seen, countless examples over the last couple of years where people are talking about going to these card shows and seeing dealers all of a sudden have so many more in-person autos than maybe they did in the past. Unless the athlete is dead and unless you can confirm they haven't signed a heck of a lot, I think it's a very risky game that people are playing in order to pay a heck of a lot of money for a card like that. Like, yes, Michael Jordan does not sign very often, like I said a little bit earlier, but who's to say that somebody doesn't come in with a heck of a lot of money and throws it at him and says, can you sign 100 of these for me? And then what's going to happen to the value of these things? Yeah, all of those might not get 10/10s, but again, that's not necessarily the point. It's the risk. Like, you're paying a premium for what? A premium that can be turned around the next day to be worthless, basically, is where my thought process has always gone. And I want to hear, what you guys say down below, because it's a no-brainer. This thing is cool to own. It's a lot cooler to own signed than unsigned, but is it really worth paying a premium? Now, what was sort of interesting to counteract what the Collectibles Guru idiot basically said in terms of a $100 million valuation, was that Ken Golden basically was interviewed by the guys at Collect, and he sort of said that he thinks the first inscription one will do between $500,000 to $800,000, and the first just base Jordan sign will do about $300,000 to $500,000 He said they'll probably, come down over time, but that's sort of what you'd expect to see for the first ones out the gate, which is a far cry from that $100 million quoted by the owner, which is, again, absurd that Collectibles Guru would even mention that. I think a PSA 10 of these is going for like $200,000 to $300,000 USD unsigned in a PSA 10. So these numbers are not that much of a premium when you think about it. And again, you might have somebody that's willing to pay double the price, maybe even triple the price to get one of these things. But, it's a very risky game because, again, anybody can come out and try and get one of these themselves signed and then sort of ruin the market for people. And that's sort of why I've always said, in-person auto stuff is fantastic. It is cool. It adds collecting to a whole other level, but you need to be very careful about paying a premium for it. I think we discussed this, a while ago when Dustin, the sports card dad, talked about his Drew Brees card consistently, right? The rookie card that he had signed. And I think he talked about the fact that it was awesome. And the reason why he bought it was because it was inscribed with Cool Breeze on there. And that's the nickname for Drew. And from his mind, it was like a no-brainer to buy it. And what was sort of interesting about that chain of events with Dustin's videos was he sort of started talking about it. And then obviously because he was focusing in on things like in-person autos, he started to notice them maybe more than he did in the past at card shows. And dealers also started bringing more and more out, as many others did talk to last year as well. These things started to show up a heck of a lot more out at the National. And when I was watching those things from Dustin, I completely agree with him. Again, it's really cool to own that stuff. But again, it seemed a bit like copium from him in the sense of, well, he was starting to realize that there's actually a lot more out there. And whilst there might not be other inscribed cards like that for a Drew Brees rookie card, who's to say that somebody can't go find him and get another one signed? And again, that's the risk you run. It's the same point that I just made a little bit earlier, but you've got people out there, talking about these things and talking about why they're cool to own and why you should, chase them and why they should make things better. But you need to be very careful, when it comes to placing premiums. You need to be very careful when you're thinking you've got something scarce when in reality it's not. Because again, like I've said multiple times, there's nothing stopping someone from going to Michael Jordan and getting one of these things signed. There's also nothing stopping, Michael Jordan turning around and saying he's never going to sign anything again, which would then obviously push these things up. But that's the risk you play, and is that something you want to play with your hard-earned money for? So for me, I want to own one of these things. I'm never going to be able to afford one, but I just don't think it's worth the premium, and I want to hear what you guys say. So I'm repeating myself multiple times now, but it's just an interesting one that we've seen pop off quite a lot, where you've got people talking up this stuff again. Like we've seen it consistently. I just mentioned Dustin. There are many others talking about these things in the hobby, but they don't think about, what the long-term impacts of those are going to be. Like somebody could just come in overnight and just destroy the whole market. Make sure the athlete is dead before you try and do some of this stuff or place a premium on these things. But even then, again, when it comes to vintage baseball, you see a lot of these things show up at shows now. Back in the day, and it was 100% the case here in Australia with, all our sports, the rugbies, the AFL, the cricket. People back in the day took those tobacco cards, took those, trading cards, sports cards to the ground, young kids, and got them signed. And whilst, yes, not many of those have lasted the test of time, it was a big thing to do back then, because that's sort of the only interaction you could get with an athlete like that. So there's a lot more out there than what people actually think. So again, just because you're not necessarily seeing it right now, who knows what's going to come out of the woodworks when people, pass away, or people realize that they found something in their dad's, attic that's actually worth a heck of a lot of money. There's things out there that are just waiting to be surfaced that, could tank a lot of what people are trying to place high values on. So, rambling now, I want one of these things. I don't think we should be paying premiums. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.